Hello everyone. Welcome to the Code Review Weekly. I'm the first up, which is OKRs. They are due by the end of the week. Um, so if we can get some ideas and then try and refine those over the next day and a half, that would be good. So we can also discuss like if you have questions about it now, that would work too. But otherwise, yeah, either way works for me.
Okay, I don't have any specific thing to add to what I added in the comment. So let's just go through the threads and discuss the synchronous. If you have any tweaks, happy to. Nothing is set in stone. So cool.
Yeah, and I have not I intentionally sort of like didn't propose any this time, so there's probably more pressure this way, but I'm trying to see where we come back on things. So I will look at all the feedback that has happened since I sent this message.
I have one question though, popped up in my mind right now. Where are we with the restructuring MR effort? Are we close to being ready to pick it up, or how's that looking?
It is still in research as far as I know. It is in like a next round of user testing, and then there's some shifts in people working on it. So Pedro's back. He's going to be picking up more work on that. Annabelle will be picking up work again on like the review rounds concept. And so I'd expect like neither of those are in an engineering state during the quarter. It's some availability.
Fair enough. So we have other stuff to pick up. I was just curious more than anything.
Yep.
Cool. Should I move on to my next point? All right. Nobody has any thoughts, then I'll move. So this is more of a heads up. So essentially, it's just something that might affect our capacity going forward. But even though it's still related work. So Stanislav has been probed and asked to join a working group that is information. It's a related topic. So it's the moving our code base to Vue 3. We've talked about this in the past. We've talked about it in the roundtables as well. This will eventually benefit our code review efforts of performance, since Vue 3 opens up a bunch of opportunities and tooling that we can use to that's not at our disposal with Vue 2. So in theory, we can have much more performant code using Vue 3 mechanisms. But for us to get there, there's still a bit of a rocky road. So Tim and Ilya have sort of banded together, and to make this effort a little bit more active and consistent, they're forming a working group around the effort. And Stanislav, because he's also close to the project and he has a couple of relevant expertise, will be a key asset to that effort. So what this means to us is that we are looking into the specific proportion of capacity we'll dedicate to this effort. We are looking at a major part of this capacity. We're just not sure exactly what. For rough measure, what we've been talking about in the context of working with something between 60 to 80% of the capacity. Not too keen on dedicating 80% of Stanislav's capacity, but 60 seems doable. Around 50, half would be something that we can accommodate in the context that the work is doing as well. But leaving a bit of the proportion for us to get the benefits of his expertise for the performance work, but it will undoubtedly have some impact on capacity. So I want to hear your thoughts, if you feel like this is a good investment or not, or yeah, open to feedback. I am supportive. I want to say that. I think it's a good move for our team and for our code base, but I want to hear your thoughts.
I think it also makes sense. It'd be good to know what the work ends up looking like. I know there's a lot of stuff that we've talked about that is Vue 3 related, and this has always seemed like a blocker. So I'm excited to see that it's being driven. It could potentially be useful to like time box this. I like the working group looks like it's gonna exist for basically the year.
Yeah.
Which I don't know if that's like reasonable or not. Like I wonder Yeah, I wonder if it needs like, I don't know, the working group can figure this out. I'm
Sandbox.
concerned that like we'll lose Stanislav for like a year to something that like then we have another half a year of work to actually realize gains, when like the reality is this needs to be spread across like probably all the product teams, and I don't know if this is going to do that, right? Like it's not clear for that. So we just need
Sure.
to watch it and be mindful. And if it becomes like a thing where we're not getting value, then we should just like try and figure out how we pull away from that.
That's a fair concern. What I'll do is I'll stay on top of things. So what I've already talked with Stanislav is there's a couple of things he already seen that he can help with. I'm thinking of doing sort of a buffer each milestone, or allocating X points for that, and whatever he and the working group sorts out for being picked up will fit into that buffer, but we still have the rest of the capacity from Stanislav, whatever proportion that is. If he has like 2 weeks vacation, then ends up not having that much capacity for the working group. So yes, I'll stay on top of things, make sure that they're relevant and they're valuable to us as a group. But all in all, it seems like Stanislav is a reasonable engineer, so it will definitely help picking the right work and picking relevant work, and not just be sacrificing capacity for the sake of it. So I feel like it's going to be safe, but I'll stay on top of it, and I'll let you know if something's changed. We can always raise the flag later if we seem that we need him more for our stuff. I'll raise the flag later. But at this point, I think it's a good stuff to work on. Okay, thanks, Kai. Yeah, thanks for putting that in writing. Should I move to the next one? Okay. So this is sort of a sharing for the group's awareness. So you've all probably seen the epic that Thomas has created from Micro Code Review. This is in our context of pursuing crazy ideas and trying to learn from them. And the idea is that maybe we can extract some bits of this experimentations that can fit our hunt for performance improvements in the context of the roundtables. But Thomas has shipped the proof of concept earlier than expected. So thanks, Thomas. Oh, you're in the car. Hi. So you can already play around with it. It's definitely restricted. It's basically just rendering diffs of the APIs right now. It doesn't have comments. It doesn't have all the feature parity that we need, but it is a start at this point that we want to see how it feels, and essentially it's loading the data from the public API to IndexedDB, and then rendering it off there first, prioritizing rendering off IndexedDB, the client side cache on the browser. So yeah, it's definitely, there's a video that he did giving an overview of the architecture, how it works. There's a snippet documenting what's the caveats right now, the POC. There's the application that you can play around with, that just allow your account, and then there's the code and the feedback issue. So the ask here is, we're going to be discussing this on the roundtable. We're going to be discussing this over the next couple of days to brainstorm how can we extract value out of this into our code base. But yes, and then we're going to have probably a call next week to kind of like actually have a call together to brainstorm around this thing after people have investigated. So the ask, especially for engineers, is to take a look at the code, take a look at the feature of the approach, and just share your thoughts on how we can make this work for us and extract value out of this. Yeah, I'll stop there. Any questions that we can help with? Thomas is also on the call. So.
I'm
You have a
curious,
question?
like what I'm thinking, like I'm curious, like what do we is the like the main thing in here that's sort of, I guess, different is the local cache. Is that sort of like
Also, the lack of view. So basically, this is not a view app. This is using native elements, web components, essentially, to render things right away without the need to ramp up and bootstrap a whole library to get things on the page, which kind of aligns with the experimentations that Stanislav has been doing for like partial server-side rendering of the static stuff. and then later tacking on the interactive stuff at a later stage. So the difference here is instead of doing server-side rendering of the initial part, we're still doing it on the front end, not affecting stuff on the back end for this. But it is essentially a different implementation, a different code base. So it's not reusing stuff in Vue, which allows us to be much faster putting things on the page and then reusing things. Now, of course, this is on a vanilla page. It's the empty page. One other interesting exercise would be how would this look inside GitLab, right? With all the Chrome around the diffs, how fast would this be? But then that's also relevant to then we can still use some of this approach to like kickstart the rendering, as long as then we can move over to a more interactive state of the page without the heavy part of first render being super heavy as it is right now. So the problem we have identified already is that everything in the page is reactive, and it doesn't need to be. That's where Stanislav and Thomas's research aligns, is that we're looking for nimble and lean ways to render the first thing you see on the changes tab, which is the diffs. And then all the, the Christmas trees that we've talked in the past can come later stage in the rendering phase. Yes, so this is the stage that we're in, but we don't know exactly how this is going to take shape into our code base. I've actually theorized something that could be meaningful to you, Kai. So one way that we can take a value out of this experiment is to bring it over to our current main diffs app. But there's also a possibility of us building something on the side as a light version of code reviewing, which would be sort of a sidekick thing, like more simplified version of merge request. But I don't know if that makes sense from the perspective of product. Like, would that even be something that we would ship? Would be something that we ship as a separate project? Like, how does that work? So right now, everything is still pretty early. We don't have any implementation of this sort of thing on GitLab with web components. So that would still be up for debate, up for discussion in terms of front-end code. But we need to find the value of this approach so that we can measure these things and extract what makes sense and what doesn't make sense. So that's kind of where we are right now. We're brainstorming at this stage, but it is something that we can see now, play around with, and we have a bunch of limitations so that the lines are not given line by line in this implementation. They're just given the content of the diff, and then it dumps on the page and does the best effort of highlighting it with highlight.js, which is definitely not production ready. However, it's an interesting flip on how we treat the diffs at this point. How we will go from here to leaving comments on lines is an open question, something that we have to sort out. But yeah, so this is sort of like a very early stage feedback request, because this might spark other conversations that could be useful. But yeah.
Okay. Yeah, you said a couple of things that were interesting in there that are like, we don't need to answer now, that it'd be worth like getting more thoughts on. One, I would like to understand this after we just talked about committing 50-ish% of someone's time to Vue 3. How are you rationalizing those two things? I think is an interesting
Sure.
point, because like if you're saying like, oh well, we built this thing and it doesn't use Vue, and then you're telling me like, oh, I'm gonna go send an engineer to spend 50% of their time on Vue 3. Like those are worth, like,
That's
it's worth
question.
understanding like how the thinking around that works. I think the other thing that you mentioned, which I don't know that we need to talk about that one now. Like, I think just think about that one, because I think that's an interesting conundrum. The technology one that's sort of interesting to me though is you mentioned that this is now using highlight.js, which is different than how we do, which is the same highlighting that we're using in like source code now.
And there's limitations, yes.
Yeah, that feels like an interesting like thread to pull. I don't have like more thought. It feels like an interesting thread, because I know we saw sort of like substantial performance gains, or I think fairly good performance gains on the source code side for that change. And so I think like that's an interesting one to think about here, because I'm pretty sure that is one of the longest lead times in diff generation is actually like going back to do the highlighting. And so I'm sort of curious about that one. That feels like an interesting
Sure.
thread to pull
I'm
on.
not super excited about that, and Thomas
Okay.
knows about this, so I can take that one first. So the highlight JS feels good on a proof of concept level. We've seen limitations of language support, but also highlighting chunks of files breaks down really fast. Because if your chunk is in the middle of a function and the highlighter is not able to capture, the grammar is not able to capture that it's a part of a function, you can start to break down the highlight. And we've seen that with Python files, so much so that a lot of language files on the blob view is being fallen back to Rouge. So we still have these two approaches on the blob page where some things we render on the highlight.js, some things we render with Rouge. So it's not fully ready for something like replacing the diffs that we have right now, or sorry, replacing the syntax highlighting that we have right now on the diffs. It's interesting because it was easy to put together, but we wouldn't be able to do this in production without major drawbacks. Which is also, so one of the things that we have to talk about if we push this forward to production level is, right, we have the blob raw file. We'll probably need a way to get the annotated, the highlighted blob content, but also per line in a way that it's performant, which goes back to batch diffs is not available on the public API, for example. This is all using the public API endpoints. This is a conversation for the backend, but we might need to tweak some endpoints together or improve the ones we have right now, or maybe it's an opportunity to introduce GraphQL. So there's a bunch of like open topics that radiate around this idea. So that's one of the answers to your questions.
Yeah, I think I would be curious to like, I don't know if there's a source code issue that like documents the highlight JS limitations. In just looking, like I've found a merge request that has, I don't know, 13 changes. It's in our project, so it's probably more well supported than like other languages. But like the highlighting matches like identical the whole way down. Across Ruby, GraphQL, some CSS, Haml, like everything. Like it feels good for this. And so like I wonder if like I know you said there's limitations and we're falling back, but like maybe this is one of those like 80-20 things where like in most cases, most of our customers actually, or a good number of customers are covered by like highlight JS and would see significant performance benefits. And then like in cases where we have to fall back, like those diffs are like on a second round trip or something, right? Like maybe there's a path there that like that is actually worth pursuing, because if there is a performance benefit to that, like maybe we get diffs up faster, highlighting pops in, and then like that feels a little better. There is differences in the highlighting, like it is not as complete. Like we have character highlighting in merge request diffs, and these are like whole line highlights. Like they don't do just the thing on the line that changed, but in general it feels good. So it would be interesting to like, I don't know, keep thinking about it without like fallbacks are not bad, right? If we cover 80% or something, like that's not unreasonable, but it's something to like
sure
look at more.
Yeah, we'll keep that in mind. So coming back to your other question, so I'm trying to find the agenda. I don't have it. I have too many tabs open. Right, found it. Yeah, the how do we equate betting on Vue 3 investment and then talking about something that doesn't use Vue at all? So one of the conversations I had with Thomas yesterday when he showed me this is, so the value that this brings is a very quick bootstrap from the native level. However, I don't see a reality that we can give away Vue support. So at a certain point in this app, we will have to inject Vue so that we can be using, say, suggestions component, the markdown components, all of those. So the code quality component stuff. So there will be a certain point in the life cycle of this page that we'll have to inject Vue at a certain point. It just won't be to the whole page if we can. That's where Vue 3 and Vue 2 make a difference. From my conversations with Stanislav, there's a couple of things we cannot do in Vue 2, especially around hydration, that we can do with Vue 3. and it opens up. I don't know. I don't have the specifics here right on top of my mind, but that's where it still makes sense. I don't see a reality where GitLab has a full web components diff app because there's so many things around it that will take us a very long time to re-implement things without Vue, and then we would block access to all of the groups that don't use web components are still using Vue. GitLab UI is still Vue, so it doesn't really make sense to ideate something exclusively without Vue. However, something hybrid starts to make sense in our minds, where we can still take the benefits of Vue, take the benefits of web components, get them together, and build something really performant. That's how I see both investments making sense. Does that clarify that for you?
Yeah, I think it makes sense. I think our team is 3, so we should just be mindful of how spread we are in technologies and paths for implementation to make sure we're not like 10% of the way down a bunch of different things. That's not
Sure. That's a fair ask. One of the things we also talked about is we can't just introduce something into the code base without scrutiny from outside groups. And there would also be an approach of like evangelizing the rest of the company to like, hey, this is a great way to leverage this technology together with Vue, and how can we make the current code base marry this new approach? So there's still a bit uphill battle for this. In something like this, if we do end up finding that the results justify the investment, we'll definitely rally people around and try to outsource some efforts if we need to. So yeah. Like I said, at this point, we're just wildly exploring, and we'll see what we can extract value out of this. And we're prepared if nothing makes sense. At least we know that this route has these hurdles. So then again, it's not the only thread we're exploring. Stanislav is exploring partial server-side rendering, streaming on the blame page that we can benefit. So that's why this last quarter was about exploration. And as we go into the new quarter, we want to start shipping the improvements out of this exploration. So that's part of my OKR comment there. Thanks for the questions, guy. That's it. I don't have anything else. Thomas, do you want to add anything now that you're at the computer? You're muted. I don't hear you.
Nothing.
Mike.
Nothing that
Great.
I want to go on a recording.
We can pause it.
yeah.
Is there anything else that we want to talk about? No. It's the last point of the agenda. So go ahead, Kai.